folks. I'm Chris, and I'm your Commander Mechanic, here with another Let's Do a Brew. But before we get started, I wanted to remind you that if you like our content, please subscribe to the channel. We have new videos every Tuesday and every Friday, and we occasionally do giveaways here as well. So if you want in on the ground floor, click that subscribe button. On today's Let's Do a Brew, we're joined by two members of the MTG Lexicon crew, Dale and G3. Dale, G3, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So you guys are from MTG Lexicon. That's a great little content streaming team, as it were. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourselves?
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start. We do EDH content primarily, where we go for 18 and up because we do drink and swear and do all this stuff. And typically, before the pandemic happened, we had 4 people in the studio and just do it live, unedited, uncut. And
4-player commander, the sweet stuff. And it kind of just started out as a friends group in a way. Episode 1 features me, but I ended up not being a host for a while. Same with Dale. We both just kind of participated in the play group for a bit after the stream had started with my brother and his roommate being Brandon, the producer. He's really the glue that keeps us together as far as the production value. And then, entertainment and host-wise, the two of us lock it down because we're both kind of outgoing individuals, Dale and I.
Mhm.
I don't think I actually said my name. I'm G3. Hi, everyone. I'm one of the hosts for MTG Lexicon. I'm probably our most prolific builder. I have around 50 sleeve decks, though I am trying to get rid of some of those now.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess I'd be the second most prolific. I'm Dale. I have around 9 decks. I tried to build like one for each 3-color combo.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right on. And where did you start off on your EDH careers, your individual paths? What got you into the hobby? Was it that friend group?
I think I can take this answer because in a way I influenced the inception of all of Lexicon because I ran into someone that my brother and I mutually know from high school, saw him like 2 years after graduation, and him and someone else who I tangentially knew were playing. I knew Magic from my brother from when I was like 8 years old. So I've been familiar with the game for a really long time. And I saw him play this game and I was like, I know that's Magic, but you guys are playing something different. What are you doing? And he gave me the rundown. I kind of had a deck already that I could just slop together as far as like a power level 1 deck. Like this would not play in any group nowadays, but got my brother started playing. And then a few years later, Brandon moved back to this area. And so his first game was a 6-person plane chase EDH, and that pissed him off on plane chase for years. And so Lexicon's got kind of a history about plane chase a little bit.
Right.
But that brought Brandon in, and then eventually Dale we knew from high school as well. And so just momentum. It's got momentum to it.
yeah, I actually didn't join till around C15 when the Commander Cat Precon came out.
Right.
One of the hosts, Jeff, was in it for a while, and I was like, hey, I want to play. I want to learn this game. And it happened, the cats came out, and I like cats, so I decided to play with that. C16. Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. And that's great. I think EDH is one of those formats, and Magic is one of those games that just kind of has like a gravitational pull to it, where you get one person who plays and enjoys it, and their enjoyment of it is infectious, and it just kind of spreads through a friend group, right?
Yeah,
it's not
definitely.
just the cardboard crack. It's the deck building. It's the actual creative expression. It's a puzzle to unlock in every game, depending on if you're Johnny or Spike or Timmy. Like you're trying to accomplish different things. That's why it like speaks to nearly everyone, because you're allowed to put your own spin on it, and that's the beauty of EDH as well. It's the most open to that kind of tinkering.
Absolutely.
I also like the whole free-for-all aspect to it. You're just 1v1, v1, v1, v1. And it's just
that's 5.
pretty much like card version of Smash Brothers, just everyone for themselves, except you build your own character.
Yeah.
I think that's apt.
I love that analogy that your deck is like a character in some kind of fighting game where every individual card are the moves that are unique to your character. And it's a slugfest, and Commander can turn into, like in Smash, something that's chaotic, where there's a million things going on the screen at once, unless you're on Final Destination, no items.
Which is like the CEDH of Smash Brothers, which is kind of funny in my opinion. That, I mean, some might disagree, but I think that comparison does hold true, where it's like no items, you're playing just skill, and it's on a predefined play area, versus more casual Super Smash Brothers is like the really just play whatever crazy brew you got going on, and you're on the biggest stage with items set to super high, like chaos.
Absolutely. Or where somebody on one side of the screen throws an item and it bounces off of two things and hits a player on the other side of the screen and goes off. That is the chaotic energy of Commander. It really is. And I think that's a great description there. And you briefly mentioned Johnny, Timmy, Spike, and the different Magic personas and player profiles. How would you describe each of yourselves as well as the rest of the group? Are you all generally around the same mindset when it comes to Magic?
Actually, a lot of us are quite different. We have Johnnies, we have Timmies, we have Spikes, and just meshes between each other, because we do have a few players that do modern competitive when Magic Fests were around. And gosh, we have people that say like, oh, I like how that is, like Omnath with elementals. You could just do all sorts of fun stuff with that. We have one guy that built solely knights. One guy did changelings before Morphon came out.
Yeah, tribal. It was all the Lord effects mixed with changelings to a Rue Goldberg machine of combat triggers and stuff like that.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. I've seen a few takes on something like that, and one of the beautiful things is that you can try to build something that somebody else has tried before, but there are a million different takes on it. It is that self-expression of deck building that really comes through when you're building something for yourself. And I'm sure with the volume of decks that you have and the group that you play with, as well as the people that you invite to stream with you as well, you've seen a lot of variety, awesome decks, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Dale, what are you? If you were to self-describe, and there's also the Melvin and Vorthos scale for those who don't know. It's whether you favor flavor or mechanical attributes. And so that's an axis that interplays with the Johnny, Timmy, Spike.
Well, I want to say I'm a Johnny, but the way I build my decks, I kind of build it to be like a character type thing. Like my Ukima deck is I try to make it like a samurai, where I just reflect things and blast people with one-hit kills.
Nice.
It's just, but then I have my Ramos deck, which is just big spells, very Timmy-ish, but I try to make it like Thanos from the Infinity War type things, where I can just snap, kill people, win the game. But I do have my combo decks that I love.
Well, I do want to say that's also another thing that people don't always talk about, where it's aggro, control, combo. That's the other three main ways to build a deck, but it's not necessarily the intent that you have behind it, because it's just how the deck accomplishes its goals, not necessarily you as a player building that deck, right? So there's the interplay of like, oh, are you playing more of an aggressive deck or a combo deck or a control deck? Like, I think that's also an interesting interplay. And like I said, I have almost 50 decks, and just seeing my spread of like moving out of my kind of Timmy roots to just like, one of the first decks was Mael the Anima, and that's still one of the decks I play, and I like it because it's big fatty things, cheat out the fatties, ramp up hella quick. But over time, it evolved into control elements. Like there's a bunch of angels that have like, I forgot the name of the one, but it doesn't let your opponent attack or cast spells depending on which one they do first, right? There's that effect, there's Avacyn, there's Sigarda. Like you just start steamrolling because you have a really good board. But one of the most challenging builds was more recent. Like a year ago, I did Thada Adel, the Inquisitor, or Acquire, something like that. And that deck really challenged me because it was completely out of my frame of reference, usually for my Timmy-like builds. This was purely mechanical. It had like no flavor to it. It was just kind of a few unblockable themes. But beyond that, it's like, I want to see what I can get from my opponents. And then COVID happened and I don't get to play that deck anymore as much as I'd like to.
Makes it very difficult to steal stuff from players when you're playing virtually, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Luckily, Infinite tokens can help you with that. To answer the question fully, I guess, I know I'm not a spike. I've never really been a spike, so I'm more a Timmy, and sometimes I have kind of Johnny interactions, and I usually build for flavor. Mm-hmm. Insofar as like a lot of my decks are tribal themed, so most of the creatures in each of those decks directly say that type on the type line, right. And a lot of the effects, like the spells, enchantments, the instant sorceries, will also mention that tribe. But then there's some tribes that I've built that's like, okay, their cohesive tribe identity doesn't really have a flavor tribe. It's more like a mechanical tribe in a way. And so that does show up in my deck building.
Yeah, and that's something that I love too. I love that the definition of tribal is very, very loose when it comes to building a tribal deck. Mm-hmm. And I'm very much the kind of player who will build a tribal mechanical deck. So mm-hmm. I'll say like, this is a +1/+1 tribal deck.
Yes.
And I did a few tune-ups on the channel. One was a trample tribal deck led by Stonebrow, Crows and Hero.
Oh, nice.
So everything in the deck synergizes with trample, or dealing combat damage, and gives everything trample, and then benefits everything with trample. And most recently, I did a Torgar deck tune-up, which was half life total tribal, and every effect in Magic that halved someone's life total was in that deck, and it was just about doming someone for half their life with wound reflection out.
Oh, nice.
So just one-shot someone. And that kind of stuff, that's where I go when I go to deck building. I don't go, everything in here needs to be a dog, or everything in here needs to be an angel. Everything in here needs to make me do this one thing better. And it's these different takes on Magic, whether it be themes or mechanics or actions and goals, that mean that the three of us could build a deck around a commander and then come back with three vastly different decks. And that's one of the beauties of EDH as a format.
Yeah, I almost don't believe in staples for the format. I mean, yes, there's the Command Tower and Soul Ring, and there's the best cards for color, but then anything beyond just ranking cards by how good they are, what you're actually gonna play depends on your play group. That's the underlying effect. Like you shouldn't be playing for the opponent in a vacuum for EDH. You're playing to the opponent in non-COVID times across the table for you, or in virtual EDH with the rectangles next to your rectangle. You're supposed to be playing for those people.
Right. And let me pose this question to each of you. If you're playing a blue deck, or a deck with blue in it, is a card like Rhystic Study an auto include for you because it's so good? Or are you the kind of person that can say that doesn't fit the theme of the deck, so I'm not going to include it?
See, I'm the exact opposite of G3. I do have certain packages always put in my decks.
Packages,
like
yes. But
all my decks have to have at least 10 to 12 ramp spells, 10 to 12 card draw spells, and Rhystic Study is always in there when I have blue.
I want to interrupt you by saying that's not two mutually exclusive things. You're talking about packages. You're talking about ramp. You're talking about draw. You're talking about card advantage. You're talking about several things that can play together within a framework, like the hypergeometric calculations. Those packages, yes, that makes sense. I'm just saying the specific, individual cards you play within those packages, I don't think is super 100% defined.
Right.
But for me, my packages are defined. Like I always have the Rhystic Study, always have the Brainstorm, always have the Opt, always have, if it's 3 mana or less, I have that in those packages.
Yeah. And what about you, G3? If you say if it doesn't fit the theme of the deck, if it doesn't fit what I'm trying to do with it, it's not in?
Yeah, I'm a scavenger for deck building. I'm a kind of like a gardener where I'll just start piecing together based off of synergy, and so typically I'll in lieu of high efficiency cards pick the synergistic cards. That's typically how I build.
Right.
But my Thought Adele deck, for example, because it broke my synergistic tradition and went with just a kind of a I don't know, this meta effect where it's like it gets bad or good depending on the opponents, right? I have Rhystic Study in there. I have Mystic Remora in there. And so those are, two of the best draw spells in blue. And so it was interesting to also do that in that deck building process where it's like, yeah, in this case, I do want to pick that because I want this to be like an efficient machine where I typically don't build for efficiency.
Fantastic. And it takes a strong will and somebody who has built a lot of decks to be able to say, this is out of my comfort zone. This isn't what I would normally do with this. This isn't the kind of deck that I would normally build. And to do something different. It's something that comes from the versatility of building a lot of decks. You've got over 50 decks. If that's the case, then clearly you've got the experience building those decks, and you can say, well, today I want to build something different. Today I want to get outside of my comfort zone and try something new.
Yeah, and I put a cap around the start of quarantine to only do 2 of each color combo. Mm-hmm. And so that had me retouch about 3 of my decks that were triplicate in that color combo. And so like I turned my I had a Marath deck that was my Dragon Tribal deck, and now it's that same deck but splashing a little bit of blue because I want that Sarkhan Planeswalker to be useful. And so I went with I forgot who the Kings of Melitus to just ramp out land and be able to fill out some of the mana curve for that deck, because that dragons typically are on the higher CMC.
Right on. And Dale, with your decks, when you're building your decks, do you take them apart? Do you revise them pretty often, or is it the fact that you build a deck and you say this one's done and it sits until new cards come out?
Oh, totally not at all. Like, I always play the deck and then I say, this card isn't working quite as well as I thought I would. I even have a deck like sitting on my table right now that I have opened up and I have them separated in certain packages. Like, okay, does this draw me as much cards as I want? Or this card, usually I already have enough cards in my hand. I could probably replace this with a big creature instead. It's just to keep my opponents on their toes, pretty much.
Tweak and tune and refine. And when you play in a play group like the lot of you do, like the Lexicon crew does, then sitting down with the same deck, and you really get to know everybody's decks and you can anticipate what's going to be in them. So keeping it fresh and changing them pretty often is a way to kind of throw a curveball to each other when you're playing.
A good example of that is Dale's Moldratha. He's gone through, I want to say, 8 thematic shifts with that deck. And the theme packages that he has in there, like he'll change like different ones at different times, and it's been probably the most varied deck within our play group.
Right now it's Mutate. It used to be just aristocrats. It used to be token 1/1 counters. It used to be super friends.
Wow.
And right now I just like the mutate mechanic a lot though, so might be keeping that for a while.
I just did a Muldrotha Enchantress deck.
Nice.
That one's spicy because you're using all of the enchantment creatures in there too, so you can essentially play 2 enchantments out of your yard every turn and get all of the synergies out of that.
Triggers,
yeah, exactly. It's a blast, and the few games that I've played with it just starting out is good. And the one thing is that it's struggling to find a win con right now outside of combos or combat damage. When you build your decks, do you look at how a deck is supposed to win, or do you just look at this is what I want it to do?
For me, the win cons typically last. Once I have my packages set up and I have like all my values set up, I was like, all right, is this too dirty? How do I actually win? And can I do that within 8 turns? If not, maybe I should revise it and look at it a little bit.
Right. G3, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'm with him on that. Typically, win cons are on the last to. A lot of my decks are combat-based tribal decks, and that's really the easiest way to describe them. So the win condition is combat, but really it's winning through synergy. That's honestly the best way to describe it. Yep. You're just happening to hit a lucky break with the critical mass of what that deck's trying to do, right? That's typically the case. But there are other, like my non-tribal decks, there is usually at least one or two cards where you're like, if I play this, I'm hoping to win. That's typically the case, but that's one card out of 100. That's a 1% chance, essentially, to, I'm not building 10 cards that work together to win on turn 5. That's typically not the case for us in our play group.
Building the big convoluted combo, hey, if I get these 10 cards out of my deck, it's going to end the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, to go back on topic of Muldrotha, typically more often than not, my win con with Muldrotha is just mill. Just because mill's good synergy, pretty much card draw for Muldrotha, and it mills everybody out eventually if you're startling.
And with Muldrotha, it's virtual card advantage as you mill yourself. It's as if you had access to the card. So it's definitely a win by synergy in that case as well.
Yeah, absolutely. With Muldrotha, it's like you have your entire your entire graveyard in your hand, and you can pick and choose what you're casting every turn. That is card advantage. That is drowning your opponents in card advantage because they've only got access what's in their hands. You've got access to your entire graveyard. So good angles of attack. And I think that's why Muldrotha is a very popular commander too, just because you've got access to everything that's been pitched as well. Yeah. Right. So one of the things that we do here on the channel, apart from talking about our decks and our deck builds, is we do a deck build. We do a brew on Let's Do a Brew. And we, at time of recording, have a spicy new legendary out of Zendikar that we want to talk about today. And because it's so new, I'm gonna pull up a description of it here, but it is the new Omnath. It is Omnath, Locus of Creation. And I'm going to have a picture of Omnath down here as well, so everybody can see the wall of text that exists within Omnath's box.
It's good to get specific because it is very specific.
Right. So when everybody's seeing this, Zendikar's going to be out and live at this point, but this is a brand new card to us, so we're going to explore it a little bit, no pun intended on the explore bit, and see if we can't do a bit of a brew and try and break Omnath a little bit. So Omnath is a blacklist commander here. It is all colors except for black, and enters the battlefield and draws a card, which on its own, for a 4/4 body for 4 mana, drawing you a card when it enters the battlefield, it's always going to replace itself and it's always going to get you some kind of value, which is great. But the rest of the card is your value engine here, because Omnath, like many of this Omnath's predecessors, has landfall triggers. The first landfall trigger is very white and gains you 4 mana, or 4 life, rather. And if you get a second landfall trigger in the same turn, it generates you 4 mana, one of each of Omnath's colors, so everything but black. And then if you manage to get a third landfall trigger in a single turn, it deals 4 damage to all opponents and all planeswalkers you don't control, which is a great way to be a clock for your opponents too. And right away, I don't know about the two of you, but my mind just races with all of the possibilities to build around this Omnath.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty interesting, and the unique templating with for the number of times this has resolved this turn. It kind of makes me remember the elementals from the Shadowmoor Lorwyn block, where you can activate their ability 3 times, and that might be something we end up looking at, because on the second landfall trigger is the one that generates mana. That's something we can be looking at as some of those if this resolved 3 times this turn effects.
Right. Right, Dale, where does your mind go right away when you see this Omnath?
Now that Omnath finally has white in there, he has access to all the Bant options. And what is one of Bant's big things? Blink. We have Rune, we have Brago, all the cool Blink mechanics that can be put in there immediately. And there's at least 2 cards that I could think of that are able to blink land, so you could have multiple landfall trigger.
That's a fantastic point there too. The 2 cards, just for reference.
One is I want to talk about this a little bit more in depth. Is Ruin Ghost. That's 1 and a white. You could pay 1 white and tap it, exile target land you control, then return it to the battlefield under your control. And the other one's Ghostly Flicker, which is exile 2 target artifacts, creatures, and/or lands you control, and return those in the battlefield under your control.
That's fantastic. And those are great ways to be able to enable this landfall on opponents' turns too, being instance and activated abilities, which is something that you don't normally get to do. One of the limitations of this Omnath is that once you've got your 3rd landfall trigger, you don't get anything more out of it. It's not like it triggers again on the 4th. Once you get 3 landfall triggers, you kind of exhaust this Omnath. So a goal of this deck should be to consistently get 3 landfall triggers as often as possible.
Maximize it, yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but also if you blink Omnath himself, can't you also get another 3 landfall triggers?
Absolutely. The game state sees Omnath as a new
object.
Card.
Yeah,
as a new object.
And you draw another card.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it comes back into play. You get to draw another card, but then you refresh all 3 of those landfall triggers. So if you are able to do something like get 3 landfall triggers, blink Omnath, and get 3 more landfall triggers, just the value that you're generating off of Omnath, not only are you ramping with your lands, but at that point you've generated 8 mana floating in your pool too. Omnath is one of those commanders that pays for itself if you're able to do it.
Definitely.
Right. And for me, I go immediately into how to exploit this with as many lands to play a turn as possible. So I go to the Explorations, I go to the Azusas, I go to the Oracle of Moldias, and I know not a lot of people have the ability to, but I go with all 10 fetches in this instance, because 1 fetch is 2 landfall triggers. And in this, it's a land equals 4 life and 4 mana. Again, you can't beat that. If you're able to do that consistently and from your graveyard with something like a Ramunap Excavator or a Crucible of Worlds, then again, the value that you're generating every turn is just going to crush your opponents.
Oh, yeah. And let's not forget Panharmonicon. That will just make them trigger twice. Make it insane.
Yeah.
Couldn't forget that.
It's a shame that this Omnath doesn't have black in it, because Yarok would be a great companion for this too.
Maybe next year.
Exactly. Or at the rate that we're going.
Or even the Commander Legends. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe we get a mini Panharmonicon creature out of Commander Legends coming up. We'll see. And at this point, again, at time of recording, we've only seen about a third or a quarter of Zendikar Rising as well. So who knows what other goodies are going to be in here too.
Oh yeah, there's so much potential to come out soon.
Yeah. So the other things that we'd want to do with Omnath that don't involve Omnath are going to be around lands, and lands matter. What cards come to mind outside of Omnath when you're thinking lands matter?
So I got a pretty nasty card. I want to talk about that now that Omnath has white in them he could use. It's called a Realm Raiser.
Oh,
it's a 3 in Naya that's red, green, and white. And it's when Realm Raiser comes into play, remove all lands during a game. That's yours and opponents. And when Realm Raiser leaves play, return all the removed cards tapped into their opponent's control.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Armageddon, but I noticed with people having Armageddon, they don't like that, so they get rid of your big stuff. But once they come in, you have all those triggers, and then you can pull in all your landfall from that.
Yeah.
That's scary that you went there. That's what came to mind.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
One of the things that you do have to be careful of is because it is the enters play, leaves play triggers like that, you get the World Gorger Dragon conundrum, where if it enters the battlefield with the ETB trigger on the stack, someone removes it, then all lands are just gone forever. And I mean,
don't be that person.
Yeah, that is an expensive Armageddon. But again, nobody likes mass land destruction.
No.
I don't think anybody will want you sticking an Omnath on the board with everything else gone, too.
Totally.
And we are kidding, not trying to yuck anyone's yum. If you like MLD, as long as you're playing to the table, as we said earlier, as long as your group's cool with it. I don't know, our group has stigmatized MLD for 3 years or so. We had a couple incidents.
Yeah, and many play groups are that way too. They rule zero out something like that because of the corner cases where you'll have somebody who has no way of winning drop an Armageddon and just set everybody back to zero. And those kind of instances are things that nobody likes. Nobody likes the hard work of having to play a land a turn to have them all taken from them before they're able to do anything.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I mean,
so we won't lean into mass land destruction here, even though we could break the symmetry of mass land destruction by using abilities that pull lands out of yards. One of which is Splendid Reclamation, which is a great way to enable multiple landfalls, and its combo brethren in Scapeshift too. Both great ways to get multiple landfall triggers.
One that I typically go to because it's pretty budget option, it's like 30 cents, is Explorer's Scope. That's an equipment that costs 1 to play, 1 to equip. Whenever it attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you can put it on the battlefield tap. In this 4-color deck, probably not necessarily, but my mind does go to cheap includes like that typically for a Lands Matter deck. And for a deck that is 4 colors, we want to pay very close attention to the kind of ramp that we have too. We're going to want to be able to pull lands out of our deck, but because we're in 4 colors, we probably aren't going to have a lot of basics in the deck. So we're going to want to lean on cards that get non-basic lands out of our library and onto the battlefield. Our ramp is probably going to be Farseek and Skyshroud Claim, as opposed to the Kodama's Reaches and Cultivates. I'm blanking on the name. I'm trying to look it up, but there's a card from the Alara block. I think it's 3 and a green. You search for an island, a mountain, a plains, and a swamp. You get 1 of each, a basic of each. So that'd be 4 landfall triggers. And there you go, 4 mana just to activate Omnath, and you get your mana back to spend on something else.
Yes, and let's not. Also, there's Hour of Promise, which I believe was from Our Devastation.
Yes.
Where you search your library for up to 2 land cards and put them on battlefield taps, then shuffle your library. Then if you control 2 or more deserts, create 2 black zombie creature tokens. So you can easily do that to get your Valakut and whatever you want. Just probably Field of the Dead at that point. Yeah, and this is the kind of deck where you could go with a Valakut route too, and include things like Dryad of the Elysian Grove, which enables an extra landfall and makes all of your lands every basic type, and something like a Prismatic Omen, which I know is a little pricey, but very much synergizes with Valakut and ensures that you've got color fixing outside of something like a Chromatic Lantern. And that brings up a topic that we touched upon before, whether you're building for a win condition. In this case, if I said I want to have Valakut as a win condition, I would start shaping my includes in the deck with that in mind, versus trying to toss Valakut into a deck that might be able to get off. But honestly, you need, I think like 15 mountains or whatever, at least as a threshold for that to work. So definitely a consideration, but that's as far as like wanting to win, that's something you should probably consider before you pick
80 cards and you're trying to whittle down.
Exactly. And I'm going to link up here to a video that I released on the channel about win cons and deck building around win cons, when you should think about your win conditions during deck building, as well as how many win conditions you should consider for a deck. I'm a big fan of the rule of 3. Have 3 different ways of winning in most decks. If your primary win con is combat damage, make sure that you've also got a non-interactive way of winning, something that your opponents can't mess up, and try and have some kind of combo in there too. And if that's the case, I would say that the combo in this deck would be a Valakut with Scapeshift, and go with the classic modern combo of Scapeshift and making all your lands mountains and just bolting everybody, right?
Okay, I mean,
Classic.
There's that combo, and I also have an interesting one with the Rune Ghost I said, and also Retreat to Coral Helm.
Love it.
Which is a blue landfall. If you guys don't know, it's whenever there we go. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose one. You may tap or untap target creature or scry one. And of course, you gotta untap the Rune Ghost and then bounce the land again, get another landfall trigger from the Retreat to Coral Helm.
You can build redundancy into that by also doing Knight of the Reliquary, which has you tap, sack a forest or plains, and then you search for any land and put it on the field. And then there's also Walking Atlas, which is another just tap, put a land onto the field.
Right. There's Sakura Tribe Scout too, which does the same thing that Walking Atlas does. There are a few creatures that do that same tap to put a land into play, and you can use the bounce lands to do that multiple times every turn, so that you're always getting your 3 land drops if you've got 3 land drops, or just by tapping the creature and putting the land into play. And you can even do that on opponents' turns too, which means you can be getting Omnath's 3rd landfall ability on everybody's turn, and that very quickly turns into a clock.
And if you also happen to have Deadeye Navigator on the field as well, you could get unlimited mana. You can rebounce out Omnath, get unlimited landfall triggers, unlimited card draw, unlimited life, unlimited everything.
Yeah, at that point, you can draw your library, since Omnath's ETB draws a card. And as long as you get the 2 landfall triggers, you're making the mana to blink them again and again and again. You end up making, again, infinite colored mana and drawing your entire library. At that point, it should be game over if you're leaning heavily into the combo win con in these cases. One of the cards that I'm personally a huge fan of when it comes to Lands Matter decks is Tatyova, Benthic Druid.
Oh, yes, love that one.
She's a great value engine too, and a great backup for winning when it comes to Omnath. If Omnath isn't castable, if Omnath has been removed a few times and is prohibitive to cast, Tatyova is your backup landfall trigger here in gaining you obscene amounts of life and drawing your entire library out with some of these combos.
I do want to say a caveat or an update to the card I was trying to remember earlier. It brings them to your hand, unfortunately. It's Shard Convergence. Search your library for a plains, not a basic. A plains, an island, swamp, mountain, they go to your hand. But for a 4 cost, I still like that card. And I mean, you still sometimes need lands to your hand to operate Omnath. So still a good card, and that's 45 cents. Also good include for other decks.
Absolutely. That's one to watch. Everybody pay attention. Lands in hand is very important. Lands to the battlefield is great, but lands in hand is important because if we've got lands coming from our hand to the battlefield time and time again, then we can do those neat tricks like playing lands on other people's turns and putting lands into play on other people's turns. One of my favorites, which is a really niche corner case card, is Ghost Town, which has the ability on an opponent's turn, you can return it to your hand. And you can do that as much as you want. So it's redundancy for bounce lands, like Simic Growth Chambers, for instance. You can, on an opponent's turn, return it to your hand, tap your creature that puts a land into play, use the Retreat to Coralheim to untap your tap creature, bounce Ghost Town back to your hand with its own ability, and just keep going crazy.
There you go.
Way.
There's also Mina and Den, which you can pay to return a land to your hand, and then you get to give a creature trample, and they allow you to play an additional land each of your turns. I'm thinking of a green effect. I have it in my lands deck. Let me just look at my list real quick as a little reminder.
For sure.
While you're looking, because this is a deck helmed by Omnath, we have the ability to include Omnath's other 3 incarnations inside this own deck, which seems really cool because it almost tells that evolutionary story of Omnath throughout the course of his existence, right? From mono green to Gruul to 3-color Teamer, and now Blacklist. And like we said, in a year or 2, who knows if we get a 5-color Omnath too.
Yeah, well, we also gotta remember. I blanked out, sorry.
Here, I got one then. Kefnet the Mindful, not the card I was looking for, but definitely a good card for this because Kefnet costs 3, has flying, indestructible. You might not attack with it because it can't attack or block unless you have 7 cards in hand, but it has an ability for 3 and the blue. You draw a card and return a land to your hand or to its owner's hand. And so with that Omnath ability, the 3rd time you can just pay for that effect. You're drawing a card, then you can have your trigger next turn, essentially.
Yeah, and that brings up the Moonfolk out of Kamigawa.
That's actually what I was looking for. Was Patron of the Moon's good, but I was going to say Miloku the Clouded Mirror, which is a flying 2/4 Moonfolk wizard for 5. 5's a little much, but pay 1, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and you get a 1/1 illusion. So if you're a little creature light on this deck, this is a good way to both get lands back to your hand and fill the board a little bit and make sure you have some blockers up.
Another thing, that's what I just remembered, is man lands as well, like Dryad Arbor and the other lands that could turn into creatures. Now that you have blink abilities in there, you could also blink those and have multiple landfall triggers off of them as well.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. I would, if we're leaning into some blink tricks, include the new Thassa Deep Dwelling in here too, which is a great Conjurer's Closet style effect at the end of each turn, with the upside of being a big indestructible body if you've got Devotion, and the ability to tap down creatures just in case you're being threatened too, or you need to clear the path for your creatures to get through. Yeah, all fantastic options. I think that we really have a deck coming together here. We've got some great options and some great synergies. I love that we've all contributed something from our own wheelhouses into this list, and I can't wait to see what it looks like coming out of it. And I can't wait to see if the deck in action is able to get 5, 6, 7 land drops per turn with all of the great land synergies that we have in here too. I think that it's going to be a sight to see. I'm excited to add a 4th color to Omnath and Land Matters decks. Great. So, gentlemen, Dale, G3, before we go, why don't you let everybody know where we can find you, where we can watch more of you?
You can find us at mtglexicon.com. That's our website.
Oh, don't go there. We don't do anything to that website. Well, go twitch.tv/MTG_Lexicon to see the action. You can go to our YouTube, just look up MTG Lexicon. You can see our VODs there. We don't do any editing. We're doing it live content. So if you hear some stuff you don't like, let us know. We'll try and fix it in the future, but it's still going to be a permanent record because we're a live stream and we do 0 editing because we don't have the time for it. You can find me on Twitter and Discord as G3_Lexicon. And Dale is none other than the bad boy of EDH. Should someone fight him for that title?
Nope, that's my Twitter handle. I got to it first. You can't have it unless you pay me.
Amazing, guys. And I've been on the stream before, and I've played some Magic, and I've played some filthy drunken
Casual commander content. Hey, you remembered our motto.
I love that you remember it. That's great.
Right? And everybody else should take a look at the channel. They do great stuff. I know I'm going to come and make sure that I'm on again, play some Magic with y'all, and maybe I'll bring an Omnath deck if we're able to put it together.
I'd love to see that.
Awesome. So for everybody, thanks for watching. Let's take a look at the list that we put together. Gentlemen, thank you once again for being on.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
It's been real fun.
So here's our list. You can see that it is very green heavy, unsurprisingly, because of the land's theme. Blue, white, and red end up being splashes in the deck for very specific cards and very specific reasons. We do have 3 lines to winning in the deck, as is my deck building style at least. Our first route to winning is using Omnath's Landfall trigger on everybody's turn. Our tap to put a land into play creatures, along with something like Retreat to Coralhelm or our bounce lands, lets us really take advantage of this, and 4 damage to each opponent on each turn is a very quick clock. Our second route to winning, like we discussed, is a Valakut Bomb. We want to use abilities that give our lands all land types, along with Valakut, in order to just drop a bomb on the table. And our third line to winning is attacking with our lands. There are a few cards in here that make our lands bigger and make our lands creatures, and since we're putting so many lands into play, we are very quickly going to have an army to attack with. You can see that the land count in this deck is much higher than typical. There are around 45 or 46 lands in the deck. That is because we need lands to play. The deck doesn't function without additional lands to play. So it is more land heavy because a lot of that is utility, a lot of that is color fixing, and we want to be able to just drop 4 lands a turn on our turns most times. This is a really cool deck, and one that I might put together because it reminds me so much of one of my favorite decks, Tattoo of a Benthic Druid. I wanted to thank Dale and G3 for coming out and talking about some of the new spoilers from Zendikar Rising. This new Omnath Locus of Creation is a commander to look out for. I like this brew a lot, and maybe you'll see it here on the channel. If you like the MTG Lexicon crew and you like their content, make sure to check out their Twitch channel. You may see some familiar faces there. If you like our content, once again, please subscribe. We have great videos every Tuesday and every Friday. But until next time, folks, good luck and have fun.